Good afternoon to all of you. Sorry for inconvenience. Today, I, Snelata, on the behalf of Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, welcome you in a 7-day valued course, Human Right: A General Perspective. I'm highly honored and feel the privilege to have been the opportunity to address the eminent speaker for today. Today, we have a respected Yusuf Afzal Khan sir. He did all academic journey from famous university, Aligarh Muslim University, and uh, he is presently working as a faculty in the Department of Law, Integral University, Lucknow. Today, he is going to cover the topic evaluation and development of the human right, which is very important topic for us. So, I'm very sure our today participants is very going to enlighten for this lecture. He is also just a fascinating person, and we are all in for a treat today. Without further ado, please just join us, and I welcome you, sir, in our value-added course. And good afternoon, sir. Sorry for inconvenience. Today we are getting late for the internet issue and some technical issue. So I welcome you in the department in the value-added course. So welcome, sir. It's up to you, a dice for you, and just enlighten our participants. Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Dr. Snelata. Thank you so much. Please accept my thanks for giving me this opportunity to share my views in the Department of Humanities. Am I audible properly, Dr. Snelata? I've been given the task to deliver a talk on the paper which we have been pursuing, Understanding of Human Rights. So the topic which have been selected for me is development of human rights. I shall try to trace the history of development of human rights, say from a few centuries to before Christ era. It is also widely believed that human right is a brainchild of the West, or as they like to call them, civilized nations, to feed their bloated egos. We shall examine the veracity of this claim as well. To begin with, we initiate the traditional way, entering this domain of human rights through the portal of two great wars. Dr. Sab, is the screen shared? Are the slides are visible? World War I lasted from 1914 to 1918. Almost most of Europe, United States, and whole of Ottoman Empire was involved in this war from one side or the another. About 9 million people were killed, out of them 4 million were combatants and 5 million civilians died in occupied territories. These deaths were mostly due to genocide and epidemic that followed. And as it happens in every war, crime against women was a collateral humanity needs to be ashamed about. If we trace the reason behind World War I, the early part of 20th century was the time of colonialization. Almost all the European powers had colonies. Almost all the European powers had colonies in Asia and Africa. Almost whole of Africa was colonized by the European powers. And obviously there was no set pattern of dividing the land between European powers of Germany and France and England and Italy. They usurped the land as they came about. Then it was but natural that there were certain boundary disputes between the European powers in Africa. And gradually these disputes increased to such an extent that their bitterness traveled thousands of kilometers to Europe. Then the other reason, there were two countries amalgamated together, Austria and Hungary. There was under one monarch. So the crown prince argued Ferdinand. He was visiting Bosnia. He was killed there. The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand was one of the instantaneous reasons, because being killed in Bosnia, Sarajevo, the city in Bosnia, it triggered what we know as World War I. Austria annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina. Then Hungary annexed Serbia. Germany attacked Russia. Then Britain, Japan, and United States entered gradually. And this local dispute was converted into a full-blown world war. Ultimately, the World War came to an end in 1918. There was deep concern in the leaders of the world and the nation states because of this human tragedy which the humanities suffered, about 9 million deaths and atrocities and excesses on the women. They wanted an association of nations so that if ever there is an international dispute, it should be solved through negotiations and bilateral or multilateral dialogues. The primary goal, according to the Covenant of United Nations, is that it included preventing wars through collective security and disarmament and settling international disputes through negotiation and arbitration. In course of tracing this history of human rights, after establishment of United Nations, about 15 years passed, then again there was some discontent, and again there was some extraordinary activities in Germany, which culminated into another war of the same rather greater dimension, which started in 1939 and lasted till 45, which we call World War II. Again, there was mass scale deaths. About 20 million combatants died. The civilian count was 40 million. Cause of death, as always, genocide, bombing, starvation, and epidemics that followed. And crime against vulnerable group, women, unprecedented. I would like to share a couplet which Dr. Zeba Akil read out in the opening ceremony. कि बस दुश्वार है हर काम का आसा होना, आदमी को मैसर नहीं इंसान होना. Such treatment was meted out to women that the male humanity should be ashamed even today. It was the greatest human tragedy in terms of life lost, mass scale violation of modesty of women everywhere. Rape was used as a weapon. Then again, as was the case after World War I, leaders of the world started thinking in direction of having a different international organization, because everyone believed that it was utter failure of League of Nations that resulted in World War II. Efforts started way back in 1941 during the initial days of World War, but people who have seen the ways of the world knew that this war is going to culminate in a international mass scale dispute. So we had an Atlantic conference in which Churchill and Roosevelt. Churchill was the Prime Minister of England, and F.W.D. Roosevelt was the President of the United States. They met aboard a warship on which Roosevelt came from America in a place called Newfoundland. The meeting, organized and desired by Churchill, had twofold purposes. One, the formation of an effective international organization, and second, to persuade US into joining hand with allies in the war. We know that the world was divided into two groups in the World War II. One was Allied forces, the other one was Axis forces. The Axis comprised of Germany, Italy, and Japan mainly, and the Allied forces were France, England, and later on, in the late stage, it was joined by the United States as well. So England was suffering heavy thrashing at the hands of Germany. Germany has annexed and occupied most of the Europe by then. There was fear that they are going to annex England as well. So Churchill was desperate that United States enter into the war on the side of allies to stop the approach and advent of Germany. Although United States refused to join the war at that spur of time, but later on it joined. In next step, we had a Dumbarton Oaks conference in Washington, D.C. during the war itself. The place was known as Dumbarton Oaks. Here, the new international organization start taking shape. USA, UK, USSR, and China. They were there in the meeting along with representatives of some other countries. One thing I should like to remind you that during World War I, USSR was not in existence. It was the Russian Empire. Monarch was known as Tsar. Because USSR came into existence after the Russian Revolution of 1917, so we saw the World War under Russian monarchy. Now, when the world was trying to forge a new international organization, we had USSR as a major military power. So United Nations came into being on October 24, 1945, as we all know. Its preamble says, quote unquote, to save succeeding generations from scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought up untold sorrow to mankind. So main purpose was to avoid any such war in future. It also mentioned to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in dignity and worth of human person, in the equal rights of men and women. Here lies the foundation of human rights, as the Western powers claim themselves that they were the pioneers of human rights. I am not going into the definition of human right because we have heard it umpteen number of times that rights which are inalienable, which come by the fact that a person is a human being, so rights will remain attached to it. We have an organ of United Nations called ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council. Article 55, Clause 3 of the Charter says, with a view to creation of conditions of stability and well-being which are necessary for peaceful and friendly relations among nations based on respect for principle of equal right, self-determination of people, the United Nations shall promote 1. Universal respect for observance of human rights and fundamental freedom for all without distinctions as to race, sex, language, or religion. Later on, in 1946, United Nations Commission on Human Rights was established. It lasted till 2006, 60 years. Then in 2006, UN Commission for Human Rights was abolished and another body which was named United Nations Human Rights Council was established. What was the reason behind? They said that the membership criterion of the erstwhile commission was such that many members were having poor human rights record. So the aim was to have such filtration process in giving membership to the council that only those nations can be given membership who have a clear and fair human rights record, because it is the basic principle of international law. Whoever comes for justice should come with clean hands. Apart from that, the human right which United Nations strives for are equality, freedom of reality, freedom of association, freedom of religion, women rights, LGBT meaning thereby lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgenders. That means we are not only ensuring rights on the basis of sex, but we also ought strive to ensure rights on basis of sexual orientation. Then racial and ethnic minorities are given proper place for observance of human rights. We have another document in the United Nations which is called Universal Declaration for Human Rights. The preamble of the declaration begins with, I quote, whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all the members of human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Its Article 1 states, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Then the provisions follow right to life, right to liberty and security, slavery and servitude. I think we are aware of these two terms, slavery and servitudes. Slavery was a system in which human beings forcefully rounded up other human beings and they became their property. These human beings were sold and purchased. They had no right whatsoever. They did not have even right to express opinion. They were chattels of their masters. And this West which claims to be a pioneer of human rights today, they were the slavers in the 19th and 18th, 17th, 14th, 15th, 16th century. Whole of slave trade from Africa to North America was carried out by these Caucasians. And the way these slaves were treated and carried across the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, they were packed and stacked in the ship like we stack up cartons of products. Half of them died on the way. Then when they came to the shores of North America, today as we know, United States of America and Canada, they were sold in the markets of slave. Servitude is a term which says a person enters into an agreement with his master to work for a specific period of time. He cannot leave before that. What in India we know popularly as Bandhuwa Mazdoori. So, Universal Declaration of Human Rights aims to root out servitude as well. Thankfully, slavery is no more prevalent in the world. Then they also aim to root out cruel punishment and torture to the convicts and under trials. The same West which boasts itself to be champion of human rights, United States of America, has a prison named Abu Ghraib prison. I don't think there are many of us who have not heard of this prison and who do not know what type of torture the prisoners undergo there. There was a Dr. Afia Siddiqui from Pakistan. She had a doctorate in some medical science field from American University. She worked there. She returned after 9/11. Then she was arrested from Afghanistan, taken away to America, and she was subjected to such harsh torture, and trial went on. She was awarded 86 years of punishment, and she could not sustain the torture, physical torture and mental torture she was subjected to. She's living, she's in prison, but what we call in vegetative state. Then they say equal protection of law. Universal Declaration of Human Rights also aims to root out arbitrary arrest and detention or exile. They are for fair and public hearing, presumption of innocence in criminal charges. As we know, for the humanities student, let me tell you, in all criminal proceedings, the law is that whoever is charged with a crime should be presumed innocent unless and until he is proven guilty. Barring some exceptions, we have the law almost everywhere in the world. Then the Universal Declaration of Human Rights aims to root out arbitrary interference with a person's privacy, his family, home, and his correspondence. Because authoritarian states often tend to violate the privacy of citizens and non-citizens. They want to keep a tab on where a person is going, whom he is meeting, how and to whom he is corresponding with. Gone are the days of letters. Now it is a time of electronic correspondence. So they try to spy in that sphere as well. Then comes freedom of movement, right to leave any country and return there. Universal Declaration of Human Rights wants each and every nation state to provide freedom of movement to their citizens, and it also wants it to grant right to leave the country and return there too. Unlike in our country, we are often told to march out. They also offer right to nationality, meaning thereby there should be no person without a nationality on this surface of this world. We have seen very sorry state of affairs during the Rohingya crisis, recent Rohingya crisis before the advent of Corona COVID epidemic. They were virtually in state of statelessness. The Rohingyas, they sailed from one country to another, but nobody took them in. Then they are for rights of men and women who have come of age to marry. Men and women of age have a right, should be given right to choose their spouse and marry. Then they are also for freedom of thought, conscience and religion, including freedom to change religion. Here again, we have seen some very strong reactions and incidents on this right in our part of the world. Even in our province in which we live. Then comes freedom of opinion and expression, which is guaranteed by Article 19 of our Constitution. Freedom of assembly, we have Article 19. The list is unending, not unending, but a long one. But the big question is, are these rights justiciable? Can anyone go to any court of law and ask the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to be implemented? Can you enforce Universal Declaration in court of law? That is the big question. There was one jurist, Sir Thomas Holland, 19th century German jurist. His famous quote is that international law is vanishing point of jurisprudence. The question involved here is sovereignty. It is believed that international law should not be regarded as law, as it is easily violated and there is no sovereign authority to enforce it. We are dealing with the word sovereign. Then I would like to mention an English jurist who was there in 18th century named John Austin. According to him, he defined sovereign as that determinate human superior who commands habitual obedience from the bulk of society and is not in a habit of obeying a like superior. That means sovereign is an entity who is superior among those around that entity, and he commands an obedience of that society from which he is from. And the third point, he is not in habit of obeying the like superior. because there might be another sovereign in another part of the world with another set of people following him habitually. But sovereign, to reduce this definition in simple words, it will be easier to say that sovereign is an entity or an authority or a person or an organization which is externally free and internally supreme. So this term externally free is antithesis to all of international law. How can United Nations enforce its universal declaration of human rights in a country when United Nations Charter itself claims to respect the sovereignty of all the countries? That is, that is the crux of the problem. So the question of justiciability remains. A host of human rights, very fancy ones, appealing to reason. But if you want to enforce them, where do you go? You have nowhere to go. So it is good to read the black letter of the word, black letter of the law, as it is written in books. But it is better to know the reality as well. So the reality is, to enforce a right in any court of law, the right should be a part of the municipal law or the constitution of that country. Unless that right finds place in the municipal law, it is not enforceable. This is also a fact that many countries have incorporated many of the provisions of UDHR in their own constitutions, like we have done. Article 14, 19, 21 are live examples of our constitution makers incorporating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the Constitution. But the question remains, what is the fun in having a fancy United Nations declaration which is enforceable at the mercy of municipal law only? Now we move on. So much so for the for the League of Nations and the World Wars and the United Nations and the Universal Declaration. Next question I pose before you: is human right a 20th century concept? Is human right, as claimed by the West, their brainchild, which they came up in 1946, 1948? They say that human rights are inherent to all human beings by virtue of them being human, fine. Regardless of gender, very good. Nationality or place of residence, sex, ethnicity, religion, color, etc. And human rights is further classified into civil rights such as right to life, liberty, and political rights like rights to protection of law and equality before law. Dr. Snehata, are you there? Dr. Snehata, is there anyone from Humanities conducting this talk? Is there anyone from Humanities in this studio. मैडम कोई स्टूडियो में नहीं है ह्यूमैनिटीज का? ये बताइए कि मेरी Dr. Snehata. Okay. It's almost 3. I want to know how much more time do I have?
You have only 5 to 10 minutes if you want to explain your topic.
Madam, I'm because we started late. I'm just halfway through my lecture. What to do?
Yes, sir. You can continue. Take your time, sir.
Okay. I'll try to wind it up in 15 minutes.
Okay, sir. Okay, fine.
So this classification of civil rights like right to life, political rights like right to protection of law and equality before law, economic rights including right to work, to own property, to receive equal pay, social rights like right to education and consenting marriages, cultural rights including right to freely participate in cultural community, and collective rights. Here comes the difficult part. The collective rights like right to self-determination, one of the most politically controversial right, which International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 1 awards that every person has right to self-determination, but all the countries, including our own country, has a different view on it. Continuing to the question, is human right is a 20th century concept? It is boasted that there was Magna Carta in 1215, which is first ever document on human right. What happened was that England was ruled by one king named John. So the aristocratic structure of English royalty and aristocracy is such that there is a monarch, and below the monarch there are 13 barons, and then further lesser aristocracy is there. So several of these barons revolted against the monarch, and French army was about to invade France. There was threat that King John will be displaced and France will take over. So the barons coaxed him into giving up some of his privilege and immunities of the royal family, and also he was forced to grant certain individual rights to free men. Remember, these rights were given to free men only, not slaves, not unlanded laborers or farmers. What was Magna Carta? It was a monarch who was trying to save his kingdom. The question remains, did the human right initiate in 13th century then from Magna Carta? We will find in the books of human rights and the books of law mention of Habeas Corpus Act. Habeas Corpus Act was passed by British Parliament in 1679. Habeas corpus is a writ which is granted by the court if someone has been detained illegally against the law of the land. but Magna Carta itself ensured this right. So this act prevented monarchs from having their opponents arrested. Then there's a Bill of Rights in 1689. This Bill of Rights outlined specific constitutional and civil rights and ultimately gave Parliament power over monarchy. Few important features of this Bill of Rights is that Parliament will be convened frequently and the permission of monarch will not be necessary. Free elections will be held and members will be given freedom of speech in the Parliament. In India, we have parliamentary privileges. Those parliamentary privileges have genesis in the Bill of Rights. Then freedom of religion, speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly and freedom of petition was also granted. Right to due process of law. I'll come to what is due process just in a few moments. Freedom from self-incrimination and double jeopardy. These rights find place in our constitution today in Article 20. Article 20 has 3 clauses. One ensures protection against ex post facto laws, meaning thereby we won't be subjected to any punishment for a law which was not in force at the time of commissioning of the act. Then we have rule against self-incrimination, that we won't be subjected to be a witness against ourselves. In April 2022, Home Ministry of India got a bill passed and enacted which is called Criminal ID Bill, Criminal ID Act. So now, for the last 1 month in India, we have a Criminal ID Act which empowers the police to take identification marks in form of fingerprints and other biometrics like retina scan, facial scan, maybe blood sample, DNA also, and that will be kept with the law enforcement agencies. So this rule against self-incrimination is straight away violated in that act. Let's see when this dispute sees the light of the court. Then there is a rule against double jeopardy, that no person should be punished twice for an offense. Then there are rights of accused, free trial and speedy trial. Trial, of course, is not free nowadays. It's an expensive commodity. And of course, not speedy as well. We know the millions of cases which are pending in the court of law. Then I come to the concept of natural law. Let me remind you that I am trying to trace the history of development of human rights, to examine the veracity of claim of Western powers that human right is their brainchild. They have come up with this brilliant idea to give rights to human beings. Natural law is known as law of abidance to the law of nature. Natural law says principles of ought needs to be followed. There is a debate in the realm of law between is and ought. When a sovereign says this is the law, that law is. But when we say that this ought to be the norm of society, then that we say that this is what a reasonable person will think. The classical example given often again and again is that if a person is drowning in river and a swimmer is standing on the shore and he does nothing to save the person, he dies. So that swimmer will not be in violation of any law. It is no crime for the positive, as far as positive law is concerned, because there is no law which places a duty on that swimmer to save the drowning man. But the natural law says this man ought to have saved that person. This is a classical example. And any ordinary, reasonable, prudent human being will say, yes, he ought to have saved that person. Natural law says that law is universal and common to all humanity. Again, Article 14, right to equality. Article 14 of our Constitution reads, the state shall not deny to any person equality before law or equal protection of laws. Then Article 21, we have no person shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty except according to procedure established by law. We have certain very interesting details about 14 and 21 in form of Menka Gandhi case, but being short of time, I won't go there. Let's pass on quickly. The point I want to make is that human rights, this natural law is also talking of human right without this terminology. If we say that law is what it ought to be, law is what natural, ordinary, prudent person will say that this ought to be law, then no reasonable human being will claim anything obnoxious to be a law. Then we come to two religious philosophies, Islamic and Hinduism. Maulana Maududi was a prominent Muslim scholar and philosopher, jurist and historian. A thinker from Canada, Wilfred Cantwell Smith, describes him as the most systematic thinker of modern Islam. Maulana Maududi wrote a book, Human Rights in Islam. And he writes that right to life, right to security, right to freedom, right to privacy, right to human dignity, right to fair trial, negation of arbitrary power of the rulers, justice, freedom of religion, abolition of slavery are basic human rights. And we all know that. Abolition of slavery was much taught topic of the beloved Prophet. So many traditions are there for it. Then freedom of religion is there. The initial Islamic rule under the Prophet, and then after that under the four rightly guided caliphs, all the people of other religion, mainly Jews, were free to live. So these basic rights, according to Maulana Maududi, since they are part of Islam, so human right is nothing new to Islam. A proper person who is following Islamic tenets is always on the side of human rights. Then we come to rights of women, because women is one vulnerable group who have been subjected to cruelty and exploitation again and again. Women were considered chattels in almost every civilization. In England, which boasts itself to be a developed nation, Women were not allowed to study, to go to school. They were not allowed to write. They were kept illiterate. In the dark ages, when Islam was fully functional, most of the systems of the world do not recognize inheritance rights of women. They are prevented from education. Girl child is always considered inferior to boy. Girls are given in marriage without consent. All this is violation of human right. What Islam says, there cannot be a marriage without consent of the girl, and if she was married during minority of age by his father, she has option of puberty. When she comes of age, she can either approve that marriage or she can either resign the marriage. The chapter 4 in the Holy Quran, Al-Nisa, verse 11 to 14, specifically mentioned inheritance rights of female relatives. Quran nowhere mentions male relatives for inheritance. It emphasizes on inheritance of female relations because males were already traditionally in heirs. Then about rights of prisoner and laws of war clearly mention no oppression of women, children or old people. Only combatants should be fought with, and if they are prisoners of war, decent treatment should be given to them. Islam stresses on compassionate and merciful treatments of have-nots by the hands of those wielding power, those rich and higher up in the society. Protection and proper treatment to vulnerable group is human right, and that is what Islam is about. I repeat, protection of vulnerable group is human right, and that is what Islam is about. Then we come to the other religious system, Hinduism. There is a famous book, very important book of Hindu mythology, Gita, in which Krishna gave certain sermon during course of a war. Islamic teaching, do not wait in expectation of your dues. Almighty knows it all. To speak in Urdu, अपने हक हासिल करने के लिए कोशिश में मत रहो, अपने फराइज ज़्यादा अदा करो. This is the duty jurisprudence of Gita. Do not wait for bounty. Just fulfill your duty. This one sentence embodies all of human right. If every human being is content with fulfilling his duty, certainly there can be no violation of human right at all. Krishna said that no action is intrinsically right or wrong. It is the intent that makes it so. I would like to quote first tradition of Sahih Bukhari. Innamal a'mal bin niyat. हर अमल का दारोमदार नियत पर होता है. No action is intrinsically right or wrong. It is the intent that makes it so. I would like to mention Karna's character of Mahabharata also here. Karna, this was a man who was brother of Pandavas but was fighting on the side of Kauravas. So during war, his mother goes to him and asks him to take certain decisions to the detriment of his war prospects, because Pandavas were also her son. So this Karna, just because the duty to jurisprudence says so, that mother was asking for something, it was his duty to do that. So he accepted his mother's diktat. So how can we just claim that human right is a 20th century concept? And we have seen in the last 3 or 4 centuries that Australian Aboriginal population have been just cleansed by the Europeans who have gone and settled there. Not one Aboriginal Australian is alive now. The slave trade, who carries the mark of that coercive operation of African people who have been carried to Europe and North America? Then despite the due process clause and despite United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, who invaded Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Egypt on false ground? Who kept mum when Yugoslavia happened? The Bosnia war in last decade of the last century? The list is unending. Who looks away when Israeli forces target practice on the shores of Palestine? Who is responsible for toppling dozens of lawfully established governments around the world in the name of democracy? Democracy, a big question. Is it a boon or pain? Allama Iqbal said about democracy, I would like to read out that rubai, that quatrain. कि जमहूरियत क्या है? एक मर्द फिरंग ने किया फाश, अरचन के दाना इसे खोला नहीं करते. जमहूरियत क्या है? एक मर्द फिरंग ने किया फाश कि हरचंद के दाना इसे खोला नहीं करते. जमहूरियत वो तर्ज हुकूमत है जिसमें मर्दों को गिना करते हैं, तौला नहीं करते. This is a big satire on this system. Just the minimum dignity which have been spared to us, that we are not put on a scale to give quantum and valuation to our votes. The big question, how can we say that vote? We all know that democracy means adult suffrage. We all know that democracy means universal vote for everyone who has come of age. That translates into a father and a son, both having same value of opinion in formation of a government. A 60-year-old father who has seen the ways of the world, long experience behind him, and an 18-year-old son who knows nothing. Both have same weightage to decide on the formation of government. The teacher, the professor, and the students both have same weightage of vote. What type of system is this? We need to ponder about. Because higher education is not just learning things by heart. I'm addressing to the university students who are listening to this talk. Higher education, you have already learned things by heart which was needed by you. पहाड़ा याद कर लिया और बहुत सारे ग्रामर और अलंकार याद कर लिए. Now you are here in the university to develop an ability to think beyond these things, to think critically, to question the actions of powers that be. You have to develop that quality. I will pass on this Hoffel's analysis. It will take much time again. Some other time, if we get opportunity, we'll discuss this. Dr. Snehata.
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Snehata.
Yes, sir.
So, is that all?
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I'm very sure about that. Your lecture is very benefited for our participants, and this lecture is very useful for us itself also, because you just explained about the what is Hindu mythology and what is a Muslim mythology, and all holy books are written in our word, and what is human right according to the mythology also. Because human right is a various perspective is there, but one another perspective is that कि हमारी मैथोलॉजी में भी बहुत सारे पर्सपेक्टिव बताए गए कि ह्यूमन राइट्स को और कैसे हम समझ सकते हैं. So I'm very thankful to you and your valuable time. So thank you, sir, and you are free for leave the studio today. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
sir. Welcome again. Very good afternoon to all of you. Here, I Snilata on the behalf of Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. This is another segment, and second segment is for value-added course. So today we are going to welcome Dr. Anil Kumar Singh, sir, for next another topic. He's going to cover third module and explain about what is the rights of minorities and all minorities' right and women rights also. So we are going to listen to Anil Kumar Singh, sir. So please stay connected and continue watching, because this course is created and formatted for you only people. So please keep watching. So welcome, Anil, sir. आइए आइए भाई आइए आ जाएगा. यहाँ से किसको लेना है? F5.
Thank you so much, Dr. Snehata, for giving me. So, student, previous class I was tell you about to unit third to the scenario of the human rights to belong of the women rights or the some criteria are the relevant to the constitutional order for the Indian scenario and to the constitutional for the UN peace and council law. So that we have discussed about women rights and women structure for overall development to the Indian perspective. Today, I am telling you, presenting for the minorities rights. Hello, student. I am Anil Kumar Singh, Political Science Department of Humanities and Social Sciences Department, Integral University. Today, I have discussed about two introduction of the minorities right. Celebrated on the 18th of December every year, Minorities' Rights Day of the significant day, which is the aim of the promoting, preserving, and the suffragetting for the rights of the people belong to the linguistic, regional, caste, and color minorities in India. It is and the it is and to the expendally for the criteria keeping mind of the end of goals. स्टूडेंट हमारे यहाँ इंडिया में एक वर्ल्ड सिनेरियो पे कहीं ना कहीं से जो एक माइनॉरिटी राइट्स की हम बात जब करते हैं तो माइनॉरिटी राइट्स को हम यहाँ पर 18 दिसंबर को हर साल मनाते हैं, जिसमें कि एक बताया जाता है कि यहाँ पर जो मनाने का जो तरीका है या जो मनाने के लिए जो एक प्रोग्रेसिव प्रमोट है, उसमें हम लोग किसी भी कह सकते हैं कलर को लेकर के या किसी लैंग्वेज को लेकर के या किसी कास्ट को लेकर के एक रिप्रेजेंट करके हम उसके साथ नहीं मना सकते, उसके साथ रख करके नहीं करते, बल्कि हम एक उसे प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए कहीं ना कहीं से हम इसको क्या करते हैं, मनाते हैं। तो ये बात बहुत सोचने वाली है कि इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में जो एक बात रखी गई है कि विदाउट कलर, विदाउट कास्ट, विदाउट रीजनल, विदाउट कह सकते हैं लैंग्वेजेस, के अकॉर्डिंग हमारे यहाँ पर ऐसा कोई भी चीज नहीं बनाया गया है, बल्कि जो भी चीजें बनाई गई हैं उसे कहीं ना कहीं से प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए बनाई है, उसे कहीं ना कहीं से उसके राइट्स को डेवलप करने के लिए बनाई है। वो राइट्स जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल रूप से उनको दिया गया है, सो दैट दीज आर द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल राइट ऑफ द फैक्ट टू द इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन to the support has the given the equality, given the resolutional right, given the everyone to the including the minorities to, so that the increase of the poverty. After all, the minorities are the continuous sickness by the observing to the minorities, so that in Indian constitution, because they have to identification, they have to notification that to the grievances for the rights and revolute for the protective in order for their reasons for their constitution। यहाँ पर हम जो भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की बात करेंगे, हम जो भी इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की बात करेंगे, वहां पर हम एक माइनॉरिटीज के उन प्रिविलेंस की बात करते हैं जो उनको दी जानी चाहिए। वो प्रिविलेंस जो किसी भी रूप में हो सकती है, किसी भी स्वरूप में हो सकती है, उसका कोई ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई स्पेश एक जो कह सकते हैं कि जो चीजें एक मेजॉरिटी को दी जा रही हैं वही चीजें माइनॉरिटी को भी दी जाएंगी। ये एक कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डेवलपमेंट है जो कहीं ना कहीं से एक ग्रेटिट्यूड के रूप में इसको लेकर के आ रही, कह सकते हैं कि एक धरातल स्तर से इसको लेकर के आ रही है, जो इस हमारे इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को एडॉप्टेशन के साथ रखते हैं। तो नेक्स्ट इज द कि हाउ आर द माइनॉरिटीज अंडर द इंटरनेशनल लॉ। हम लोगों ने इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के अकॉर्डिंग भी हम यहाँ पर बात कर रहे हैं, लेकिन यह इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के अकॉर्डिंग जो हमारे पास आ रही है माइनॉरिटीज की, वो कहीं ना कहीं से हमारे पास एक किस पे आ रही है, एक इंटरनेशनल लॉ के साथ आ रही है। जैसा मैंने आपको प्रीवियस क्लास में बताया था, वी हैव डिस्कस अबाउट टू अ प्रीवियस क्लास टू अ सिस्टम ऑफ द वीमेन राइट्स फॉर गिवन टू यूएन ऑर्डर, then the adaptation are the 1978, so that minority rights to be adaptation for the 1992 to the purpose of the United Nation, to the nation for the minority declaration, for the promotion for the minority, protection for the minority person to the belong for the who who was the person for the minorities sense are the ethical, regional, and the linguistic minority are the so that they contribute for the political and social stability. Further, element are the minority are the encouraged for the constitution in 1992। हम यहाँ पे अडॉप्टेशन की जो बात करते हैं वो 1992 के अडॉप्टेशन की बात करते हैं, जहाँ पे एक यूनाइटेड नेशन के साथ हमारे साथ एक अडॉप्टेशन को यहाँ पर रखते हुए बताया गया था। जिस तरीके से हम लोगों ने एक विमेन राइट्स की हम लोगों ने बात की थी, उसी तरीके से माइनॉरिटी मतलब अल्पसंख्यक की भी हम बात करते हैं। वही अल्पसंख्यक जो कोई भी हो सकते हैं, किसी भी कास्ट में हो सकते हैं, कहीं भी हो सकते हैं, किसी भी रीजनल एरिया में हो सकते हैं, किसी भी स्टेट्स में हो सकते हैं, हम उनकी बात करते हैं जो कहीं ना कहीं से सोशल एडवांटेज के साथ या पॉलिटिकल एडवांटेज के साथ या पॉलिटिकल कंट्रीब्यूशन के साथ उनको इन्वॉल्व नहीं किया गया है। Some are there is no intellectually to the great differentiation to the who has the minority to the extent of the nominative question fact or the career, both of the objective factors to the share लैंग्वेज एंड रीजनल। जैसे मैंने बताया कि आपको एक लैंग्वेज के एथनिक रीजन के आधार पर, एक रीजन के आधार पर हमने आपको बताया था। इस तरीके से हम ये देखते हैं माइनॉरिटी सिस्टम के साथ जो भी चीजें हमारे साथ जुड़ती आ रही हैं, वो चीजें कहाँ पे आ रही हैं, वही चीजें हमें कहीं ना कहीं से इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में भी दी जाती है। अब हम बात करते हैं कि व्हाट आर माइनॉरिटीज राइट। आखिर माइनॉरिटीज के जो राइट्स हैं वो हैं क्या। माइनॉरिटीज के राइट की अगर बात करते हैं तो माइनॉरिटीज के राइट्स जो है वो जनरल असेंबली में भी हम यहाँ बात करते हैं, यूनाइटेड नेशंस में भी। ऑलरेडी इन 1948 the General Assembly declared to the chart of the United Nations could be not remain different to the fate of minorities. It is the major part of the 1948 to the generalized system for the minority system for the every including for the persons are the nations, so that there are the some are article to the inspiring to the minorities rights. Says that article 29 27, the international convert to civil and political rights, ICCPR, which are the most important rights of the acceptable for the human being or the minority system. So that we have accepting for the human and expecting for the human religionship, human minorityship, to the great idea for the free and human being, for the all citizens, to the relevant or the adaptation for the political freedom to the can be achieved for the any other recognition system. Other we can say that not to be any condition to be adopt for the minority system. These are the major concept. There are the major concept to the scenario are the minorities rights. And I have to they are the citizen for the political rights to the undertaking for the political ethics, political knowledge, political responsibility. It is the very useful for the political rights for the every nation's every women personality for the minorities rights to know how to about to the minority rights to to the every knowledge for every person. So that article 7 we can say that article 7 is the regional platform, language platform, and the presence of mind, your presence of mind, presence of your motivation. These are the dignity of rights to the continuous process are the article 27. Article 27 is the very professional to the cultural and the perspective for the knowledge. These are the regional or the to the one languages for the acceptable. हम आर्टिकल 27 में हम यहाँ पर देखते हैं कि कौन कौन से चीज़ों को यहाँ पर एक एडॉप्टेशन के साथ रखा गया है, एक लैंग्वेज के साथ इसमें हम यहाँ पे के साथ उसको हम रख सकते हैं, एक कहीं न कहीं से एक रिलीजियस के संग हम इसको कहीं न कहीं से इसको एक तरीके से इसको जोड़ सकते हैं, और इसके साथ साथ हम उन सब चीज़ों को भी एक पर्सपेक्टिव नॉलेज के साथ, एक कंजर्वेटिव नॉलेज के साथ, एक कहीं कहते डोमिनेटिव नॉलेज के साथ भी हम इसको जोड़ते हैं, जो माइनॉरिटीज को कहीं ना कहीं से प्रोवाइड कराई जाती है, माइनॉरिटीज को मिलना चाहिए, माइनॉरिटीज को दिया जाना चाहिए. अब इसी then the United Nations Declaration on the Human Rights of Minorities, we can say that the previous class I am already to discuss about to the United Nations Declaration for the all over the rights for the measurement or the criteria. So that United Nations is also declaration on the rights of the minorities for the for the protectable knowledge, for the identical thesis, for the open state mind, open promotion. These are the ethical and cultural, religious, various platforms are the included by the United Nations Declaration. So that under the Article 2 first, these are the concept are the every significant are the United Nations Declaration. So that we have says that Article 2, Article 3, and resolution to the kinds of the determinants of the Article 3. We have discussed about to a United Nations Declaration of human rights, rights of the minorities. So that first of all, General Assembly for the resolution in 18 December 1992 in India perspective. So that exclusive for the and secondly Council of Europe, हमारे कह सकते हैं राइट्स के अकॉर्डिंग हमारे यहाँ पर हम सिर्फ इंडिया में ही नहीं, इंडिया के एडॉप्टेशन में ही नहीं, एक यूनाइटेड नेशन के एडॉप्टेशन में नहीं, कहीं ना कहीं से यूनाइटेड एक काउंसिल ऑफ यूरोप में भी इसकी हम यहाँ पर बात करते हैं. हम लोगों ने एडॉप्टेशन लिया है, स्टेटस ऑफ द राइट्स ऑफ द national minorities were given by the protocol number 12 to the European Convention on the Human Rights for the including for the minorities rights. Someone I have discussed to article first. What is the meaning of article first? The article first is the measurement to the relevant to the enjoyment or the any right so set the forth of law shall be such the without the discrimination this to the any ground such as the sex, race, color, languages, religious, political and other opinion. We can say that we have discussed about to sustainable for this scenario for color, languages and religious. So that these are the article first in here. Next is article 14. Remember to says that the previous class I am discussed about to article 21 and article 300 to also related are the related on the minorities right to the including by the article 14. What says about to the article 14? Article 14 is to the very declaration very useful for the every person or there is to the decided to the motions are the every citizens, so that we have including the sex, race and the colors, languages, regional, political to opinion, national and social region. Why? These are the minute part of are in here. अगर किसी के पास इन सब चीजों के लिए अगर कहीं रोक थाम की जाती है या कहीं अगर इसमें इनको अगर इनके कह सकते हैं अधिकारों को वंचित किया जाता है या इनके साथ अगर कोई भेदभाव किया जाता है तो क्या है इन राइट्स का हम क्या कर सकते हैं एक तरीके से अपोज कर सकते हैं जो यूनाइटेड नेशंस के साथ यूरोपियन यूनियन के साथ इसके साथ साथ इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में भी इसको एक प्रोमोटिबल के रूप में इसको रखा गया है। हम यहाँ पर केवल इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की बात नहीं करते, हम यहाँ पर इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के साथ साथ यूरोपियन एक्नॉलेजमेंट में भी यूनाइटेड नेशंस में भी इसकी बात कहीं ना कहीं से की गई है। तभी कहीं ना कहीं जाकर के एक इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के चैप्टर को इसको एक चैप्टराइज के रूप में यहाँ पे रखा गया है। जैसे मैंने बताया आपको यूरोपियन जो चार्टर है जो कहीं ना कहीं रीजनल टू द माइनॉरिटी लैंग्वेजेस को भी कहीं ना कहीं से यहाँ पर क्या करता है एक तरीके से प्रोटेक्ट करता है। वो कब प्रोटेक्ट करता है 1992 में। उस 1992 में फिर से वही बात दोहराई जाती है, फिर से उसको रिपीट किया जाता है कि कैसे हम उसे एडॉप्ट कर सकते हैं, कैसे हम उसे एक रोकथाम के रूप में कर सकते हैं या कैसे हम उसे सिस्टम को चेंज कर सकते हैं। हम कैसे एजुकेशन सिस्टम को पब्लिक ओपिनियन के साथ, पब्लिक इंफॉर्मेशन के साथ, कल्चरल एक्टिविटीज के साथ हम कैसे अपने आप को इन्वॉल्व कर सकते हैं, हम कैसे अपने आप को उसमें जोड़ सकते हैं, उस राइट्स को हम कैसे अवेयर हो सकते हैं। सबसे बड़ी बात यहाँ बताई गई है, अवेयर होने की बात बताई गई है। वो अवेयर हम कैसे हो सकते हैं? वो अवेयर हो सकते हैं एजुकेशन से, वो अवेयर हो सकते हैं पब्लिक इंफॉर्मेशन से, उसमें कल्चरल एक्टिविटीज से हम अवेयर हो सकते हैं, इकोनॉमिक एंड सोशल लाइफ से हो सकते हैं। वी कैन से दैट द एवरी पर्सपेक्टिव to the think of the all citizens are the prevalence of the regional and the minority rights for here. Some otherwise यूरोपियन चार्टर में इसको इंक्लूड किया गया जो कहीं ना कहीं से इसे एक बदलाव के रूप में देखा गया, लेकिन वही बदलाव एक बार फिर से कहाँ रखा गया? 2 साल बाद फिर उसी बदलाव को एक कमेटी के साथ उसको रखा गया। वो कमेटी कैसी थी? 1994 में वो कमेटी बनाई गई। वो कमेटी ही एक काउंसिल के साथ फिर से उसी यूरोपियन चार्टर में रखा गया, जिसे एक तरीके से एक नया नाम दिया गया, फ्रेमवर्क कन्वेंशन फॉर द प्रोटेक्शन फॉर द नेशनल माइनॉरिटीज। अब यहाँ पे यूरोपियन चार्टर के साथ एक माइनॉरिटी सिस्टम को रखा गया, जहाँ पे रखा गया कि कोई भी इसमें लैंग्वेज के साथ भेदभाव नहीं किया जाएगा, सिस्टम के साथ उसको एक तरीके से उसको अपनाया जाएगा। पब्लिक को बताया जाएगा, कल्चर एक्टिविटीज को बताया जाएगा, लेकिन कैसे एक फॉर्मेट के रूप में बनाया जाए। उस फॉर्मेट को 1994 में एक कमिटी आई, एफसीएनएफ, जो कहीं ना कहीं से हमें उसके ओर ले जाती है, जो माइनॉरिटीज कमीशन के साथ हमें एक सिविलाइज्ड सिस्टम के साथ, एक इंटरनेशनल कन्वोकेशन के साथ हमें एक पॉलिटिकल राइट्स, एक सोशल राइट्स, एक डिफरेंशिएशन राइट्स और अदर राइट्स को क्या कराती है, एक तरीके से एक प्रोटोकॉल के साथ, एक प्रमोशन के साथ हमें उसे इंक्लूड करने पर मौजूद कराती है। अब हम बात करते हैं कि माइनॉरिटीज राइट डे इन इंडिया, आखिर हम लोगों ने इंडिया में इसको मनाने के लिए ही क्यों अडॉप्ट किया। तो यहाँ सबसे बड़ी बात आती है कि जो इंटरनेशनली जो हम माइनॉरिटीज की बात करते हैं, वो तो इंटरनेशनल पे मनाया जा रहा है, इंडिया में ही इसको क्यों इस डेट पे क्यों मनाया गया? why should be why had been celebrate on Indian society? Because the declaration of the International Minorities Days significance are to the provided for any country to the ethical knowledge, linguistic, to the cultural, grounded group, not to be indicated on his year. So that 18 December to the every year for the minorities rights day in India. It is the big opportunity for the Indian system and Indian society. So, history of Minority Rights Day. Each are the Minorities Rights Day in India is celebrated 18 December 9 to the International Commission for the Minorities, to the dates for the religious harmony, respect, and better understanding for the minorities committee. We can say that also to be done by this year. सो दैट यूनाइटेड नेशंस में भी कहीं ना कहीं से इसकी बात जो की गई थी, एक इंस्पायरी कमीशन के साथ, एक इंस्पिरेशन रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी के साथ इसको रखा गया था, ताकि जो भी माइनॉरिटीज होंगे, जो भी इसके एसेंशियल लोग होंगे, वो कहीं ना कहीं से एक कह सकते हैं एक एम्पावरमेंट के साथ, एक कह सकते हैं लैंग्विस्टिक एम्पावरमेंट के साथ, एक एथिकल पावरमेंट के साथ वो क्या कर सके, गवर्नमेंट के संग अपने आप को इंट्रोड्यूस कर सके, सिटीजन्स के साथ अपने आप को इन्वॉल्व कर सके और कल्चरल इन्वायरमेंट को अपने साथ भी वो डेवलप कर सके। These are the concept are the national and international committee to decided for the how to reach are the minority rights to day by day to the special category for the our system, and special categories for the national commission for minorities. Every year to changes are the every year to the relevant for the fact to the attractive fact to the how to improve for the minorities rights to the begin are the first of all to present past and how to introduce for the minority rights to again are the national commission, so that minorities rights in India constitution are the adaptation by the United Nations, so that which is the platform or the United Nations to the issues are the equality of the rights, equality of the citizens, equality of the moral development. These are the very conscious for the constitutional law and rights for the every persons, so that these are the rights in here to the United Nations and European nations are the further in Indian constitution. What is linguistic, ethical, cultural, and religious? These are the also mandatory for is here, so that why it is financial or social adaptation for the people to the responsible for every citizens in here to the society. Then the article in Indian Constitution, very important part are the article to the Indian Constitution. The Indian Constitution to the mainly very functionalized, very characterized to the Article 16. Article 16 is the confirm that the case of the public employment, no uniform sense of the equality shall be allowed on the basis languages, caste, credit, colors, race or religious. हमारे आर्टिकल 16 में बताई गई है, अगर आप किसी भी एम्प्लॉयमेंट के लिए आप बात करते हैं, चाहे वो पब्लिक ओपिनियन की बात कर लें या फिर हम एक कह सकते हैं कि किसी भी प्लेटफॉर्म पे हमें सेंट्रलाइज सिस्टम की बात कर लें, यहाँ पे किसी भी रोजगार के लिए या किसी भी ओपिनियन के लिए या हम कह सकते हैं किसी भी एम्प्लॉयमेंट के लिए आपके साथ कोई भी भेदभाव नहीं किया जाएगा। क्यों? क्योंकि ये आर्टिकल 16 जो है, आर्टिकल 16 इज द ऑन द बेसिस आर द फादर ऑफ द equality of the minorities rights, says that these are the platform of the minorities system or the Indian constitution to the credit for the all person to the rights in India, so that on the what is the basis of the all citizens of the India. These are the basis of language. These are the basis of caste, colors, race, and religious. Not to be indicated. First of all, you have to be to the improve your knowledge, improve your identified, so that you have selected or any employment structure. These are the functioning platform or the article 16. देन और दिस और यही आर्टिकल 16 हमें किस पे देती है, मतलब कह सकते हैं एवरी सिटीजन्स के लिए जो हमारे भारत के अंदर माइनॉरिटीज के रूप में पाए जाते हैं, जैसे कि मुस्लिम हो गए, सिख हो गए, ईसाई हो गए, जैन हो गए, बुद्धिस्ट हो गए, पारसी हो गए। ये क्या है, एक तरीके से माइनॉरिटीज के रूप में है, लेकिन इनको किसी भी सर्विस में या किसी भी उसमें भेदभाव के रूप में नहीं रखा जाएगा। इनको एक सर्विस अपॉर्चुनिटी के साथ रखा जाएगा, वो चाहे पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन हो, चाहे स्टेट्स कमीशन हो। इन्हें एक कह सकते हैं कि एक मोस्ट वैल्यूएबल पर्संस के रूप में इनको सबसे पहले रखा जाएगा, सबसे ऊपर रखा जाएगा, सबसे एक कह सकते हैं कि एक फर्स्ट चैम्बर और द जॉब लिस्ट के रूप में इनको दिया जाएगा, जो कहीं ना कहीं से आर्टिकल 16 को एक वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल के साथ हमें यहाँ पे मिलता है। आर्टिकल 25 is very important are the Indian constitution for the minorities rights, so that article 25 is the freedom or the every individual for member and religious. Then again for the purpose of 2025 is here, so that यहाँ पर हम 25 में एक चीज हम इसमें और जोड़ लेते हैं कि किसी भी कास्ट में, किसी भी एक माइनॉरिटीज में हम यहाँ पर जो बात हम कहते हैं वो कहीं ना कहीं से एक प्रोविडेंट के रूप में, एक प्रोटेक्शन के रूप में हमें दिया जाए, ताकि वो प्रोटेक्शन हमें किस पे रखा जा सके, वो प्रोटेक्शन हमें एक स्मार्ट के रूप में दिया जा सके, एक डिजाइनिंग के रूप में दिया जा सके, एक कहीं ना कहीं से एक कन्वर्सेशन के रूप में दिया जा सके, एक पब्लिक रिलेशंस को मेंटेन करने के लिए दिया जा सके, एक कहीं ना कहीं से एक फोर्सफुली रूफ को कम करने के लिए दिया सकते, एक माइंड सेटअप को बनाने के लिए, एक माइंड सेटअप को कम करने के लिए ये आर्टिकल 25 हमें क्या करती है, एक इक्वालिटी को यहाँ पर क्या करती है, ऑन द बेसिस के रूप में यहाँ पर हमें दिखाती है। इसी तरीके से आर्टिकल 30 है। आर्टिकल 30 इज द ग्राउंड प्लेटफॉर्म ऑफ द constitutional. There are the relevant to the educational structure, educational society. Educational society is given for state government or central government or regional government to the also anyhow to apply to their the educational society for the any other culture, any other effectiveness, so that we have not getting to any platform or this year to add up the persons, so that you have should be a government should be also to grant for here to the for your stability for your education system, for your job system, for your any other for relevant are in here. इसमें इसमें आर्टिकल 30 क्या है कि अगर आप आगे की ओर कुछ करना चाहते हैं तो गवर्नमेंट खुद ही कहती है कि हम आपको आगे बढ़ाएंगे, हम आपको प्रमोट करेंगे, हम आपको यहाँ पर और सुविधाएं देंगे, हम आपको, आप आगे आइए, हम आपको इस चीज पे आगे बढ़ाते हैं। ये क्या है, कहीं ना कहीं से गवर्नमेंट भी जो यूनाइटेड नेशंस के साथ बनाए गए हैं या यूनाइटेड नेशन के साथ या यूरोपीय यूनियन के साथ बनाए गए हैं, वो सारी चीजों को इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में भी एक एजुकेशन सिस्टम के साथ यहाँ पर रख करके बनाया गया है, जिसमें हम यहाँ पर माइनॉरिटीज को सारे सारे चीजों को ग्रांट के रूप में इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में यहाँ पर बातें बताई गई है। ये बातें हमें और भी मिलती हैं आर्टिकल 29 में भी मिलती हैं, लेकिन आर्टिकल 29 हमें किस पे सबसे ज्यादा फोकस करने को मिलती है, एक कमेटी के साथ, एक सिमिलर कमेटी के साथ, हमें एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग कमेटी के साथ, या कह सकते हैं एक इंटायर प्रेजेंटेशन के साथ हमें वो देखने को मिलता है। वो इंटायर प्रेजेंटेशन हमें किस में मिलता है, जैसे कि हम किसी अभी कैसे हम नहीं कहते कि हम एक विशेष, हमें एक विशेष लैंग्वेज आती है या हम एक विशेष रिलीजियस से हम बिलोंग करते हैं, या हम एक कह सकते हैं कि हम ऐसे ऐसे जगह से आते हैं जहां पर लोग कम हैं। तो यहाँ पर इस चीज को नहीं रखा गया है, यहाँ पर रखा गया है कि आप कहीं से भी आते हो, आप किसी भी लैंग्वेज के साथ बोलते हो, आपको जो भी चीजें दी जाएंगी, आपके राइट्स में जो भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल राइट्स बनाई गई हैं, वो सारी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल राइट्स आपको प्रोवाइड कराई जाएंगी एज सुन एज टू द अंडरटेकिंग आर द प्रोसेस फॉर द, आपके कह सकते हैं कि एक ऐसे स्ट्रक्चर प्लेटफॉर्म पे बनाया जाए, एक ऐसे एडमिशन स्ट्रक्चर प्लेटफॉर्म पे बनाया जाए, ताकि एक जो आपके जो माइनॉरिटीज राइट्स है उनके हनन को न किया जा सके। आप लोगों ने देखा होगा अदर यूनिवर्सिटीज में या अदर कॉलेजेस में भी कुछ एक सिमिलर होते हैं कि अगर आप कश्मीर से हैं तो आप टिक कर लीजिए, अगर आप नागालैंड से हैं तो आप टिक कर लीजिए, अगर आप स्वतंत्रता संग्राम सेनानी हैं तो टिक कर लीजिए, या आप एक फ्रीडम फाइटर के साथ साथ आप मिलिट्री प्लेटफॉर्म पे अगर कोई आपके हैं तो आप टिक कर लीजिए। ये सब क्या है, ये एक कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल राइट्स दिया गया है कि आपके साथ जो भी माइनॉरिटी सिस्टम है, एक कह सकते हैं कि उसके आप ले करके भी आप आगे की ओर अपने आप को रिप्रेजेंट कर सकते हैं, जो आपसे कोई छीन नहीं सकता। तो ये हम माइनॉरिटीज राइट्स को एक इंडिया में ही एक इंस्पायर के रूप में देखा जाता है। इस इंस्पिरेशन को कहीं ना कहीं से एक ग्रोथ डेवलपमेंट को, एक कहीं ना कहीं से ग्रोइंग सिस्टम को, एक को भी यहाँ पे देखा जाता है, जो इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के साथ हमें कहीं से कह सकते हैं एक इक्वालिटी को मेजरमेंट करता है, एक सोशलिटी को मेजरमेंट करता है, एक हायर प्लेटफॉर्म को कहीं ना कहीं से ये एक मेजरमेंट के रूप में हमें यहाँ पर रखता है। यही मेजरमेंट हमें पॉलिटिकली रूप से या एक सब्जेक्ट के क्राइटेरिया पे भी हमें कहीं ना कहीं से ऊपर उठाता है, चाहे वो पॉलिटिक्स हो, चाहे वो इंजीनियरिंग हो, चाहे वो किसी भी गवर्नमेंट सेक्टर का प्लेटफॉर्म हो। हम सारे प्लेटफॉर्म पे कहीं ना कहीं से हम इसे यहाँ पर देखते हैं। जो माइनॉरिटी राइट्स के जो भी राइट्स हैं उसमें वो प्रिविलेंट रूप से यहाँ पर दिए जाने की बात करता है। किसी भी संस्था में या किसी भी एक सोसाइटी में हम ये बात करते हैं तो कहीं ना कहीं से इसकी बात सबसे पहले रखी जाती है। इसके साथ साथ हम ये लोगों ने ये बात कही कि आखिर इसमें ऐसे कौन से एक कंपोनेंट शामिल किए जा सकते हैं, वे कंपोनेंट जो एक कंपोनेंट के एडॉप्टेशन के साथ, हाउ टू adaptation for the component in here are the beginning society or to the inspiring system, so that the someone issues are the get influenced by the harmony person. So who was the harmony person who had adopt to the similar society, adopt to the cultural society, adopt to the minority society. We can say that we have to not to be any other system or Indian country to the adaptation for the people or the developing or the inspiration to and cult inspiration or the majority or minority issues area in here. So that's